Welcome to another episode of Narratives in Black, where we deep dive into the stories of Black leaders, creatives, and visionaries who are shaping our world. I'm your host, Amanda Shea, and today we have a truly remarkable guest joining us. Our guest today is a man whose career is as dynamic as it is inspiring. He's an artist, choreographer, director, playwright, and an advocate for diversity and inclusion in the arts. From his early days in Washington, D.C., to his transformative tenure at Adventure Theater, MTC, where he elevated the organization to national prominence. He's been a beacon of creativity and leadership. He's currently steering the ship at the Mass Cultural Council as the executive director, where he's been pivotal in launching the council's first ever racial equity plan and securing historic funding to support the arts community during the COVID-19 pandemic. He's also been a voice of inclusivity, creating spaces where stories from all walks of life can be told and celebrated. His journey is one of perseverance, passion, and a relentless pursuit of purpose. Today, we'll explore his childhood, the pivotal moments that shaped him, his journey through the arts, and his vision for the future. Please welcome to the show, Michael J. Bobbitt.
Hi, Amanda. Thank you. What a great introduction. Thank you so much.
I am fangirling right now, like heavily. You have just been an amazing contribution to our city since you've gotten here, the moves that you've made. How are you feeling today?
I feel good. I mean, when I hear things like that, it actually inspires me to work harder because it's making a difference in people's lives. And that's, honestly, even when I was just doing art or running an arts organization outside of being a bureaucrat, that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to move people and affect their lives. And so that it's happening, it makes me want to do more.
So the workaholic wants to do more work.
Yeah, I mean, I have boundaries on my time. I'm not working more than 40 hours a week like I used to. But yeah, I mean, I think it's working smarter, not harder. Yeah.
I got to shout out Kat in the backstage of where we're working because she literally just said that same phrase right before you walk through the door. So that's very serendipitous. With that being said, I'm excited to explore everything Michael J. Bobbitt because we know who you are. We know the work that you do, but we don't know you, like on a personal. So can you share with us a bit of your upbringing in Washington, D.C. and what like your family life was like growing up?
Like an expose.
Yes, we want all the tea.
Yeah. I think when you grow up in whatever situation you're in, you are in that situation. So you may not be aware of what all is happening around you. So I felt like I had a pretty good childhood. I grew up in lower Northwest DC near Howard University. Went to DC public schools until I got recruited by a private Jesuit high school. I had a lot of exposure to the arts, music and trumpet and theater and dance. When I reflect on life as an adult and thinking back to my childhood, there was significant dysfunction. Every single adult in my family had addictions to drug and mental health issues and joblessness and incarceration. So it really wasn't a happy childhood, but you somehow find a way to make it happy. Like mornings watching, the Smurfs, right? And eating Fruit Loops. That felt like happiness, but sometimes that was a mask for what was happening. What I do know is that the arts are the thing that saved me. And I think because I immersed myself in so much art, which allowed me to visit metaphorically all these different places and imagine life in different ways, it blocked out the noise that was happening at home. So it's a mixed childhood. It's hard to sort of put into words, but there was some dysfunction and some difficult times.
What was the first medium that you can remember that drew you in and said, I might like this? Like, was it dance? Was it music? What in particularly?
what I know is that every time we did art in school, whether or not it was just coloring or we went to an art class or music class, somehow I was excited. I just got excited. And I remember that I was in the third act of Hansel and Gretel. There were 3 Hansels. I was one of them. My mom says I was the best. She said those other Hansels sucked. But I was
do better next time.
Do better next time, other 2. But I was in Hansel and Gretel, and I can't even remember the rehearsal period. I just remember this one moment in the performance where it's in the third act. The witch has shoved me in the cage. I'm like on my knees in the cage, and I said something, and the whole audience, I think it was after like Gretel did something and the witch tumbled into the fireplace, but I said something and the whole audience laughed. And something shook or snapped in me that made me go, oh, whatever that is feels good. And I want to kind of keep recreating that. And so I just kept pursuing. I mean, it wasn't even a pursuit. I just kept participating in the arts, whether or not I was after school program doing ceramics or painting or art class or music. I picked up the trumpet in the 3rd grade. I started singing in the 3rd grade.
Wow.
I got to travel all over DC, even as far as Florida and New Orleans, in elementary school doing the arts through the DC public school system. But somehow I just kept doing it. And so hard to pinpoint that moment, but it just made everything that was happening at home okay.
Not only making it okay, but almost like providing escapism for you through a way of getting in tune with your spirit, it sounds like, and doing the things that you really love to do. How was that going back home? Like once you've gone to all these places in DC, and then now you have to come settle back into that normalcy, if you will. Do you remember what that felt like for you?
Yeah, in some ways it was both liberating and isolating. Liberating in that I got to see and experience things that other people in my family never got to. I mean, going to sing at the 1984, I'm quite old. Born in the late 1900s.
1900s.
But going to perform at the 1984 World's Fair in New Orleans, I remember the smell of the beignets, the smell of New Orleans in period, like the urine and the alcohol and the vomit and but all the stuff, like it's implanted in my head.
It's a culture.
Getting on the Natchez or at the time when the World's Fair was there, they made I don't know what you call those trolley cars that sort of go up in the air and carry people over. I forget what they're called.
I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, but it had a bottomless, glass bottom floor, so I could see the Mississippi River from way up in the sky. But those experiences just showed me that the world is bigger than the 5-mile radius of my home. And so it was liberating in that there was a bigger world out there, but it was isolating because when I came back home, no one else had those experiences. Nor did they understand it because I was the only real arts-inclined person. My brothers participated in the arts, but they were sports kind of people. And so it was lonely making and it was exciting at the same time. And I think that because it was so exciting, it made the loneliness go away, which made me pursue it even more.
Wow. Next question is pretty heavy. It's going to talk about, again, with Washington, D.C. At the same time, before I even ask that, D.C., you said 1900s.
Yep.
I go to D.C. very, very frequently, and it is blackity black black. Was it blackity black black when you were growing up?
Oh, yeah, it was Chocolate City, and we had, Chuck Brown lived across the street from me.
What?
Yeah, so go-go music was in my life.
What?
I know, people were like, Michael Bobbitt, go-go music? Oh, yeah.
Right.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, and this is the height of, like, Run DMC and...
Right, hip-hop was coming in.
Ha, 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 stick.
No, and you over here listening to go-go music.
Right, and then I got into musical theater and classical music because I was pursuing music and dance and theater, and so I sort of pulled away from it a little bit. But DC was blackety black. Now DC was also this is also when my formative years were Michael Jackson and all that sort of great 80s pop music,
Legend.
right? But it also was the height of the war on drugs.
Absolutely.
And so the neighborhoods that I lived in, there were police raids and police all over the place, and you know, and what that did to the Black community. And so when I talk about so many people in my life were incarcerated, and me going to visit my dad and my uncles in prison, partly came out of living in DC in the 1980s, when people were just being targeted because, you know, the police wanted to keep the votes, and so they created this whole fake war and arrested all these Black men. So DC was a very interesting place to grow up in.
How did your identity as a young Black boy in Washington, D.C. shape your early experiences and your perception? Like, how did your family help you navigate this aspect of your identity?
Hard to say. I think now as an adult, I can see how it influences me because my connection to people of color, my desire to see them succeed, my unhealthy desire to see people of color succeed, I think was formed by those days and what little Michael Bobbitt experienced. I want everyone to not experience that, but at the same time, I want them to see the power of arts and culture. When it comes to family, I think I was this sort of anomaly in my family because everyone was, you know, get through high school, that was the big push. Going to college was not something we talked around the dinner table about. There was no one in my family that went to college. So the life aspirations was just get through high school, and you better do good and get through high school. I'm not sure that if you didn't, there were any ramifications for that. But also, I was in the arts, and I was pursuing arts. I didn't know I was going to do it as a career, but I don't know if my family knew how to support it. They knew how to go to my brother's football games and their basketball games and their other sports ball activities, but so it's so interesting. They're supportive. I remember when I came home after college and I was in a show in DC and I told my family and they were like, oh, great. I was like, you need to be there. And they were like, well, whatever. I'm like, no. You need to be there. If you're not going to be there, we're going to have a big, big problem. And then they started supporting me and seeing that this was not just my little side hobby, it was part of my life.
And who you are, essentially.
Yeah.
I love the fact that you named that your brothers were in sports and you said a different kind of arts. It's sports. Most people do not put sports and athletes as, they don't see them the same as artists. At the same time, do you differentiate an athlete from an artist?
I don't, because I think that they both require a level of creativity that non-creatives probably have access to but don't understand that's what it is. I also see it changing. I mean, I remember watching gymnastics when I was a kid, and it was...
Me too. Dominique Dawes.
Right.
Before Simone Biles.
And it maybe was like even more dance than it is now.
It is.
Right? I mean, I remember the balls and the ribbons and stuff like
Same.
that. I also hear that breakdancing is going to become an Olympic sport, an official Olympic sport.
As it should be. It's considered floor work.
Right. So there's a fine line between I think athletics and sports, and it's interesting because in most states, and especially in Massachusetts, when you talk about the tourism sector, that is arts, culture, sports. It's all mixed together.
It really is.
Yeah, and then the connection between athletes and entertainers and how they sort of convene around sports, I think it's all part of the same world.
That wasn't one of my questions, but that was a personal, because I actually agree with you. I think that both of them, whatever you do, whether it be sports or arts, it is truly a commitment and dedication, mind, body, and spirit.
Yep.
And it can be expensive.
Yep.
Both ways.
Yep.
Speaking of expensive, we talked about your younger years, but I kind of want to shift and go into your Gonzaga college, high school experience. What was that like attending there, and how did that environment there shape your early ambitions and your interests?
So Gonzaga College Preparatory High School, it was an all-boy, predominantly white, academic school that I was recruited to go to. So the schools in the Archdiocese in DC created a program for middle schoolers. They called us talented and gifted students. And so twice a week in 7th and 8th grade, I had night classes in reading, writing, and arithmetic.
Oh my
That's what we called it back then. But there were night reading, writing, arithmetic. But there were night classes. Twice a week, I went to this other institution. I left sort of DC public school and went to this other institution. And literally, we had classes. There were other sort of wraparound activities, like we went camping and some arts activities, and we sold candy to pay for blah, blah, blah. So that very enriching experience was amazing, but the schools in the Archdiocese recruited little black kids from this program called the Higher Achievement Program to go to the schools in the Archdiocese. I can only imagine they probably got restricted grant money for scholarships for black students, and so this was a way to prepare them and also recruit them. So oddly enough, when I was in 8th grade, I was in the Shaw Junior High School band, and I had gotten accepted to the Duke Ellington School of the Arts to play the trumpet.
Wow.
And my trajectory was to go to Duke Ellington for 9th grade and go there and be a trumpeter for the rest of my life. And I remember going to my band teacher and saying, I've been given a scholarship to go to Gonzaga. And he said, I know you want to go to Duke Ellington, but if you have the chance to go to Gonzaga, go. And so I did. So that's when I transitioned from DC public schools, which were racked with all kinds of problems, to this all-boy, Jesuit, mostly white academic institution.
Wow.
It was a massive culture shock.
I was just going to ask.
It was a massive culture shock because I had experienced white people. I had a couple of teachers in DC schools, but I was never around them on a regular basis. But here I am thrown into this environment where most of the people are white. Also, I would say that learning in DC public schools was fairly easy for me. It came pretty easy. I maintained great grades, and most of the time I did my homework on the way to school. But I got to Gonzaga, and I'm walking around with a stack of books.
Wow.
And these kids are coming from the suburbs or private schools before with advanced academics, and so I was behind. And so I remember, like, that first week of school, I was like, this is not okay. So I read every single textbook from start to finish, like in that week too, because I didn't want to be behind. So the culture shock was different. The other thing that happened to me, and I still feel really bad about this, is that when I was exposed to white culture and the wealth of white culture was the first time I realized that we were poor. It was the first, because again, like I said earlier, when you're in your environment, it just is what you know, it's normal. And so I remember going to a friend's house and we had artichoke for dinner. First of all, I got to the house and it looked like a museum to me. And I literally was lost and I was like, oh, okay, I'm just gonna walk into this museum. But we had artichoke for dinner and we sat around the dinner and talked. And that was so foreign to me. And it created a bit of a depression and an anger in me because my family was poor. How could they be poor? It's their fault. And that stayed in my head for a number of years, like into my 20s. I sort of blamed my family for their situation. And now that I'm wiser, I understand that it's systemic and all these other things.
Absolutely.
But so that was a big shock. But what was great there is that the school was incredibly supportive to me. And so that's when I developed my love of trumpet. I got into the National Symphony Orchestra's Youth Fellowship Program, got free private lessons from the NSO at the Kennedy Center. So the Kennedy Center became a second home for me. I was there literally once a week. The academics were intense, but it prepared me for life beyond that. So big culture shock, but I'm so grateful to Gonzaga, and they're in my will.
Not in the will.
They're in the will. They're literally, like I owe them for so much.
What made you trust your band teacher with that decision making? Like going to him and saying, hey, I have this opportunity. What was it in you that made you ask him out of all people?
Oddly enough, even though I was in 8th grade, I got what he was saying. I got that he was saying, there are a lot of black kids pursuing the trumpet. This is a chance for you to change the trajectory of your life with the academics you're going to get at the school. And so somehow, I mean, I was super close with him, and I got it. For some reason, in that moment, I got it. I was like, I can't pass up this opportunity.
What was his name?
Lloyd, oh man, Mr. Lloyd.
Mr. Lloyd.
His last name was Lloyd. I can't remember his first name. I think it was Mr. Lloyd. Yeah, pretty sure it's Mr. Lloyd.
Shout out Mr. Lloyd.
Yeah, I appreciate him.
I love that, and that was the next question. But with that being said, because you've already answered it, how did your school experience intersect with your understanding and expression of your identity and sexuality? Were there any supportive communities or individuals that help you through this period of time while at school?
So we're still going through a phase where ostracizing gay people was still sort of part of the zeitgeist of the world, and also we were in the midst of the AIDS epidemic, which also made
at the same time of
the
drug epidemic as well, the 80s.
Yeah, which also made it easier for people to say that being gay is bad. I think all through elementary school and middle school and junior high school and high school, being called sissy and all this stuff was not only coming from the people I went to school with, but it was part of what people would say in my family. And so being gay was not okay. I don't know if I understood my feelings until about 11th or 12th grade. So there was no sort of gay club at Gonzaga. I think the support I got was really more about me being a poor black kid in this environment. I did get lucky because in high school, my senior counselor he came into the school, he was a gay black man. And I was like, what? And he was the first person to say to me, he sat down, I was having some emotional problems, and he said, is it possible that you might be gay? And I was like, no, what? How dare you? No. And I wouldn't talk to him for months. We have since bonded since then. He was like, I told you. And I was like, thank you so much. But at the time, it wasn't something I could hear. And so I didn't officially come out until I was 19, after I lived in New York for a while and came back to DC, still not quite understanding what I was feeling, but was more drawn to gay culture. And once I came out, luckily I had a cousin who at the time was lesbian. He is now trans. He came out prior to me, and so he opened the door for me to have that conversation with my family, and it wasn't hard to come out to my family. My grandmother was like, oh, maybe you could be a hermit. I was like, no, Grandma, I'm not gonna be a hermit. I understand you don't want me to have pain, but just support me and love me. Love me for who I am.
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
19.
Yeah.
19 in New York. Where were you living in New York? When did you make that transition?
So I did go to college on a trumpet and academic scholarship to Susquehanna University, but it wasn't the right fit for me. It was a small liberal arts school in central Pennsylvania. I came from a big city. I was black. There weren't that many black people there, and it wasn't fit. And I was still resolving my sexuality, my anger around being black and poor. And so when I went to this school, I was still struggling with a bunch of stuff. And so I left, went back to DC for a while, studied at Washington Ballet, and then went to the Dance Theater of Harlem for a little bit to pursue a career in dance. That was my other love. And then found my way to musical theater, because I'm 6'2", 220 pounds. Being a ballet dancer was really not in the cards, but why not try? And
why not? I would have loved to see you doing your thing.
I was tall and cute, and so who knew?
You
so
still are tall and cute.
But I did. I was pursuing this concert dance world. I don't know why, but I was doing that. And so I moved over to musical theater, but I lived in New York from 91 through really 94. I lived in two places on the Upper West Side, in Kensington Village, Brooklyn. It was poor as dirt. I wrote so many bad checks on the Upper West Side just to like make money to find food. And
they can't find you now, though.
they can't find me now. I'm nowhere. But you know, New York toughens you up. It makes you savvy in a way that you don't quite understand. And so I did a bunch of regional theater and a couple of tours, and came back to DC for a small stint to figure out how to get back to New York. And I did. I went back to New York so that time I came back in when I was 19 was that small stint between living in New York between 91 and 94. I left New York when I went on tour with a Broadway musical.
Wow.
And then when I left that tour, I settled back in DC.
So New York seems like an interesting place. You're in front of all these different cultures, all these different people. You're seeing all different parts of the city. What was it like? You said it was easier to kind of come out to your family because of your cousin's experience. But what was it like for you to come out to yourself?
You know, it's hard to articulate because it was something I didn't quite understand. I mean, again, I grew up being called sissy and fag and all that kind of stuff. And
I'm sorry that was your experience.
Yeah, well, thank you so much. And though painful, it was something that I rejected because it didn't quite feel right. I'm not sure if it's because of the derogatory and hurtful way it was intended. And I think, you know, we also it wasn't part of culture like it is now, so we didn't see it, so we didn't know. And the people that we did know had AIDS, or they were really ostracized, or really a different personality than mine. So I remember when I came back to DC in my stint before going to New York, I can't remember, the whole thing is confusing, but I remember finding myself wanting to be in DuPont Circle, which is the gay part of DC, a lot more. And so I remember joining a choir that was rehearsing in DuPont Circle. And it was a men's choir, but it wasn't a gay men's choir, though there were gay men in the group. But I just found myself like somehow finding my way, hanging out down there a little bit more. And I joined the men's choir. And I remember one day coming home on the bus, and this beautiful man got on the bus. And I was like, just gobsmacked. He got off the bus and I thought he was going to the grocery store, so I thought, I need to go shopping too. So I went shopping, and I found my way in the same line with him to check out.
You found yourself in the same line.
I was cruising him in the store. But anyway, we talked after that, and that was my first date.
Wow.
And I remember at the end of the date, he gave me a kiss, and electrics. It just was like, oh. And so that was sort of my first experience. I was like, I think I can admit that I'm gay. So that was at 19. And then it was easier when I moved back to New York to just be part of the culture, and my best friends were all gay. And so it became actually, oddly enough, normal. And it feels normal to me. Like in many ways, what's weird, so my son is Vietnamese. He was adopted when he was 5 months old. He's 23 now. What's weird to me is he's my son, and so I forget that he's Asian until someone reminds me. Same thing, like it's just so ingrained in who I am, being a gay man, that I don't think about it until I'm in a situation where I have to think about it. So coming out was really easy for me, I have to say, and I feel for people who had a rough time coming out.
That was poetically said. We are so multifaceted identities, right? And it seems like throughout your childhood, the only prevalence that you were, or the only, what's the word that I want to use? The main focus of your identity was being Black and your financial status. So that would make a lot of sense, that everything else kind of just seems very minute to that when we're talking about our identity and what shapes us. And I want to talk about a little bit about that as far as just like financial status. You had said that you had a lot of anger around your family being, low income. I'd rather say low income than saying poor, because we can be rich in spirit, right?
Yeah, love that.
So let's talk about them being like low income. When that anger was inside of you, was there anybody that you spoke about to this, or anybody else that was in your position that you said, I didn't realize where we were at financially until I had this experience? Was anyone else kind of sharing that same experience with you?
No, I think I'm quite sure there were other Black kids at Gonzaga, but I was in this period of finding more connection with white culture than I was with Black culture because of what I can say now is anger about our situation. And so there was probably some shame in having conversations with other people. I don't think I really understood my situation until I was in my 30s. And I've been doing a deep dive into discovering that even more, and sometimes the way my brain thinks and the actions I take or the instincts I have, I can go back and see that is all formed by how I grew up and what I grew up in. So again, my love and my deep connection with wanting to make sure that people of color get their due is because of what I experienced as a kid. Now that I understand it, I'm actually taking a course right now in race and inequalities, and this professor is really helping me to pull it all together and to see how society and what we've gone through has shaped the situation that we're in. And so it's all, and I keep my interest in this is still burning. There's some more answers, some more questions.
Going back to your family for a brief second, now that you're older, is there anyone in your family that you feel like, I see where they were creative and they maybe not have had a chance to express it? Or maybe this was where I got my little creative, artistic buzz from. Is there anyone that you can look back at and see that maybe if they had some of the opportunity that you had, would potentially seek the artistic endeavors or become an artist themselves?
Yeah, it's interesting because I have nieces and a nephew who all aspire to be art, and I can see how their parents are struggling with how to support them. And even though they have a uncle who's in it, they still don't, it's still so foreign. It's so
Starving
foreign.
artist is still a concept, even today in 2024.
Yeah, we have to we have to figure out why that is, and we have to change it. We have to change that mindset because some of the richest people in the world are artists. And so this idea that we can't make money, it's somehow a myth that has become part of our DNA as artists.
Do you think, and this is not a question on the board, but do you think it's because of our history with how much of our art as Black folk have been culturally appropriated, stolen, hidden? Some of our, we hear all the time, especially in music, how we are the creators of rock, of blues, of jazz, of all these things. Do you think maybe some of that is part of the Black experience when we're thinking starving artists?
Absolutely, and I would also say that it's something I've seen in other multicultural communities, partly because art is, I think, part of our DNA, like it is in our fashion, in our clothes, in our hair, in the way we talk. It's everywhere. And maybe in white culture that's not the case. It's something that's in addition to. But I think the reason why I would say partly is because this is a mindset, this scarcity model, this starving artist idea that's throughout the whole cultural sector, not only individuals, but even in our institutions. And so I wonder how much of that can be changed in our minds through some very intentional actions. And then how much is embedded and will never change. We'll just be starving artists. At one point in society, artists were the top of the echelon.
Yeah.
And somehow something has changed over time as other industry has grown and we've depended on other industry to push society forward, like agriculture and manufacturing and technology and all this stuff. Maybe the arts has been in the back. And I think as we think about the biggest value that we offer to me is creativity.
Yes.
Like all these things that are messed up about our planet, only way we're gonna solve those is through creative thinking. So in my mind, if we can stay at the forefront of the advancement of society, then arts can become this really valuable thing. And I'm not talking about value in our hearts, I'm talking about in our wallets. Because the whole sector is a little broke.
And this is a perfect segue into how did you transition from being an artist to management? How has that shaped your career path? Because you've gone to all of these universities and programs. I mean, Dance Theater of Harlem, Washington Ballet, the American Music and Dramatic Academy, NYU's Tisch School of the Arts. What were the pivotal moments during this transitional period, and what were the most significant lessons that you learned?
I think that one of the great things about the arts and somewhat to what I said before is that we spend most of our times seeing things that aren't there. Like a painter can open up a blank canvas, or a writer can open up a blank document, or a photographer can zoom in on something that the mere mortal can't see. And then what we do is figure out how to get things in our head on that canvas or on that piece of paper, and great art happens. So I spent so much time expanding my mind to the creative process, to the point where I don't get bound to ideas. My staff will tell you that, like, I'm easy to please. I'll share an idea. They'll go, no, we don't like that. I'm like, okay, great. They're like, you're so amiable. But because there are so many ideas, because I've trained my brain to have ideas. At some point in my career, when I was doing the art, I always had the ability to see the full picture. When some people were focused on that minutia, I was always like here, and then vice versa at times. And there was something about the process of making theater that I loved more than the product. So I loved the rehearsal or the pre-production practice, and then we got to doing the show every day. I got so bored.
Oh my God.
I got so bored.
You're the same person.
Yeah, right. And so, like, I would get in trouble because I would change stuff up, and then the stage manager would write me up and threaten to call the union and all this kind of stuff.
Oh,
and,
no, not the union.
but that sort of, I don't know what happened, why that happened in my brain. But sort of in my mid-30s, when I was right before I started running Adventure Theater, I had some people say, one, for survival purposes, I had to take gigs outside of acting. So I took gigs teaching and choreographing and a little bit of directing, and that puts you in a leadership position. And so you have to develop new skills to get a whole room of people to do what you need them to do. And then at some point, some people said, you really should run a theater. And I was like, okay, I don't know how to do any of that. So let me figure it out. And so I did a whole bunch of my own self-directed learning. I never finished college. And so there was always this burning thing about learning or feeling inadequate because I didn't have those pieces of paper. And so I would dive deep into my own self-directed learning. And so I happened to get this job at Adventure Theater. I was working at the Smithsonian as the director of touring production, so that gave me a little bit of management experience. But at Adventure, now I have to manage boards and finances and HR and fundraise. And so I was like, I don't really know what any of that is, so let me learn about all those things. So when I was the lead artist, the artistic director of these theaters, I was in all the rooms I could be in, studying these different skills, and also making sure I wasn't just in the room with artists, because I do think that's one of the mistakes that we make. So I joined the Chamber of Commerce. I was on the board of this group and on the board of that group, learning all these things in real time. And so, and then the last sort of 10 years of my life, I realized I enjoy being outside of the room, making the room available for artists to be artists, rather than being in the room making the art. So the transition to management was easy. The transition to bureaucracy was not as easy, because when the search firm called about Mass Cultural Council, I was like, nope, I just want to make plays. And they were like, no, there's something else for you to do. And I was like, oh, you're so sweet, but thank you. I just want to make some plays for the rest of my life. And so that took some convincing.
You think that's one of the mistakes that we make sometimes, is only being in the room with artists. Expound on that. Why do you think that?
If I were to diagnose the issues that the arts sector has, and I think that diagnosis is that we are undervalued as a sector. And what I mean by that, I want to be clear that I'm not talking about how people feel about the arts in their hearts, because there's not a person I meet that doesn't like the arts.
Of course.
Everyone loves it. But the valuation and value on the sort of capitalist term is the money. We're not valued in how much money people are paying us or giving us to do the art. So that's an issue. And I think if I use the term diagnosis, when you go to your doctor, the doctor is trying to diagnose your issue. And they're going to ask you a bunch of questions, and they're going to look at the symptoms and then come to the diagnosis. And so if we were to say we're undervalued, we're underfunded as a sector, we have to go back and ask questions on how we got there. And those are going to point out the same. And when I look at the things, it may be that most of the things that creates this undervaluation are things that we have done to ourselves. And so I think about the fact that an artist can go through 4 years of school and get a degree and never take a business class or a civics class. When you think about other sectors, they are very organized and civically engaged. There's not a lot of cultural policy that exists in our ledger. There's a reason for that, because maybe we aren't as organized as we could be. We tend to self-segregate, maybe because we don't have the language to be in the room to hang out with business people. So we only are comfortable in rooms with other artists. I was at a convening recently, and I was asking, I used the term self-segregate, and I use it on purpose because I know those words can be inflaming, and I want people to be inflamed, because I think the solution is we have to change our behavior.
Absolutely.
And so I was in a room with folk, and I used the term, and they got deeply offended. And I said, all right, let me ask you a question. How many of you all think that arts are good for healthcare and mental health? Every single hand went up. And then I said, right, every hand went up, no debate. And then I said, how many of you all went to any kind of healthcare convening in the last year? And every single hand went down. So we have a product that we can sell to the health sector as a solution, but we're not going to those rooms to sell them, either because of insecurity, maybe we don't have the language. Anyway, I could go on and on and on about that, but I really think that one of the solutions, you know, again, when you go to your doctor, they diagnose you, they say, here's your treatment plan. Most of the treatment plan is, you got to change your behavior. You can't keep eating these things, you can't keep doing this, you got to work out. If we were to come up with a treatment plan for the sector, most of it's going to be about, we have got to change our behavior, which could affect the mindset that we were talking about us being starving artists.
The scarcity mindset.
Yeah. If we change our behavior, it could affect that, because I still think when I look at the art on the wall, I'm like, where's the IP for that, so that you can sell those characters to an animated film or a playwright, or where's the fashion line based on that, where's the merchandise? All these other opportunities for us to finance the work that we do so we all can have wealth. I'm not saying we need to be greedy capitalists, but if you want a house and a child and you still want to make more art, we got to find another way to do it than just relying on grants.
Ooh.
I know, that's a whole nother series.
I love everything that you said. There's two things that you said that I do want to address. There's one, well, I agree wholeheartedly with everything that you said. One, business acumen. When we're in rooms with artists, you're absolutely right. Artists sometimes are not educating each other on business acumen, right? And how do you get outside of that? There's that first thing. But then two, what you said about mental health and healthcare. What if you're talking about going to the doctor and how the doctor diagnoses you? What if arts was the prescription?
Oh yeah. Okay, so the business acumen, one, again, it goes back to we have to change our behaviors. If we are, I would say artists are creative entrepreneurs.
Absolutely.
Now we need the language and the tools to monetize that, to monetize our ability to be extremely amazing creative entrepreneurs. The hip hop sector, this is all about creative entrepreneurship.
Remember guerrilla marketing?
Yeah, right.
That still exists today.
All that. And so then I think about like who's creating the workforce, the artist workforce, and what pressure do we have to put on them to make sure they're preparing the workforce for jobs. I get artists that when they fill out their grant application that has to go through the state's comptroller, they don't put their last name, or their address doesn't have a city, a state, and a zip code, or they don't know their social security number. Like what is that about? So I'm glad you asked about prescriptions. I don't know if you were leading me to talking about this prescription thing that we have launched.
I have heard some things, and I have not read it on my questions yet, but yes, please tell people what we are referring to, because I love how you name that, and I think mental health, healthcare, and the arts can function beautifully together.
Yep.
So please.
In many ways, I think all the things that the arts does for sectors outside the arts can be capitalized. And I'm pushing that word a lot because I think it's a word we reject in the arts. We do art for art's sake. No, we need to do it to make money.
Right,
to survive.
Right. For sustainability.
Right. So, but we haven't really thought about how to monetize it. I think, so essentially to me, mental health is a healthcare issue. And if the arts are providing a solution, then the arts should be paid for the solution they are providing by healthcare. And so a few years back, Mass Cultural Council had heard about this thing called social prescribing. It's been around for a long time, and they've really fine-tuned it in the UK and in Canada. Basically, it's something doctors have been doing for years. Doctors have been using community referrals to help their patients with non-medical interventions, right?
Wow.
And so they'll say, you need to go for a walk, or like go to the park, or go do some drawing or something like that. So they will often offer that to
Go take a movement class.
Exactly. They'll often offer that to their patients to help them with whatever issue they're having. So we brought this program over from the UK, and we focused in on arts prescribing. We called it Culture RX. We worked with, Culture RX. We worked with
that name.
30 healthcare providers in the western part of the state in 12 arts and culture organizations.
Wow.
For the healthcare providers to literally prescribe arts and culture activities to their patients. And Mass Cultural Council was covering the costs of those prescriptions. So it worked well. We were able to write almost 2,000 prescriptions.
Wow.
Where it was written for not only the patient, but a companion or their whole family to go to arts events.
That's beautiful.
The anecdotal response was super positive, not only from the patients, but from the doctors as well. One doctor said they felt like they were prescribing beauty into someone's life. The other doctor said he felt like he was giving out Willy Wonka golden tickets. And so they felt good about having another tool. The patients felt a different way about their doctors because their doctors saw them and were saying, I see you're having some sort of mental health issue. Here's something that may help you. So they did that for a couple of years, and I went in last year and said, this is really like the best innovative entrepreneurial idea that I've heard in a long time. Like, to me, this is like 911, school lunches, and seatbelts, some of the largest social entrepreneurship programs that this country has ever created.
211.
Yeah, right. So we need to figure out how to better finance this, because if it's done through reimbursements from grant dollars, I can't scale it.
That part.
So if this is a healthcare issue, healthcare should pay for this.
Absolutely.
And so I said, let's hire a consultant to help us figure out how to scale this. And let's go after third-party payers. Let's go after managed care providers and insurance companies to pay for this.
Absolutely.
They're already reimbursing for yoga and Reiki. So why don't we do this for the arts? So we hired this company. They came in. We were having lots of conversation, lots of meetings. And a month and a half ago, we announced our first statewide social prescribing solution. Mass General Brigham is doing a program for their patients, and their United Health Insurance Company, the third-party payer, is covering the cost for their patients to get ARTS prescriptions.
That's amazing.
So you get 12 doses of ARTS prescription provided to you. They come with a companion ticket, and if you need, it covers transportation costs.
That's major.
Yeah, it's pretty exciting. It's gonna scale.
Yes.
It's gonna, we're talking to as many third-party payers as we can. There are different ways to finance it. Some people can do it through funding. I've been meeting with lots of people all over the country, but this is gonna scale.
Wow.
My hope is that in 30 years, when you go see your doctor, they'll say, tell me about your eating habits, tell me about your sleep habits, tell me about your arts engagement. Because it's just part of, 30 years ago, we discovered 30 years ago that physical fitness can help your health care.
Sure can.
And they were like, what? If you work out, you'll be healthier? That was a whole new concept 30 years ago, right? So let's...
Richard Simmons, I think, was the first person on that gravy train, right?
Exactly.
Right in your living room, getting you a workout.
Exactly. So it's a social determinant of health. I think that those words are being used in the healthcare sector more. So I'm excited about this. And the good thing about it is that, again, when we think entrepreneurially, this is going to be another revenue stream for arts organizations. I'm also meeting with HR directors and CEOs of businesses to get them to add an arts benefit for their employees.
Beautiful.
And so in the employee benefit packet, or to expand on your wellness packet, you might get money to spend on arts and culture. Forbes has just named creativity as the highest skill set needed by the workforce. We need creativity. So this is a way that they can support their employees.
First of all, I just want to take a pause and just say, wow. Totally off script, but wow, thank you. How much time and energy did this take for you to do all of the research, to see that it was being used in other spaces, to even have the courage to bring it into this space?
It's been a 4-year journey for the council. The idea to really pursue a better financing model came out of me, my whole career, making sure I'm in the rooms with and learning about innovation, entrepreneurship, business acumen, being on the Chamber of Commerce board, going to programs at Harvard Business School, whatever I can do to learn a little bit more about how people build businesses.
The way that you speak about healthcare, mental health, and the arts with cultural RX, that's what I said it right, cultural RX. I'm wondering, what are you thinking when it comes to arts in education, especially when it comes to our young folks? How can we bridge the gap between those spaces? Because I'm gonna be honest, we live in Boston, and it's a beautiful space to live in, especially how we've progressed so much in the last 5 to 7 years. But what we do see is that we do see budget cuts in the educational system, in the educational institutions, especially in BPS. We've seen a lot of the arts and culture money kind of just go out of the BPS schools, but we see so much going into the arts and culture sector. How can we bridge those two, where also BPS schools, kids from middle school to high school, can receive the same type of prescriptions, if you will, as with cultural RX?
Yeah, I think the art prescription thing, part of the scale and the future of this is going beyond healthcare, but getting to social workers, school counselors. We've gotten calls from housing authorities, the Gaming Commission to help with gambling addiction, Veterans Affairs. So I think people see that this is like a really cool thing. And I also think, so too, because you talked about Boston, I think Boston has a unique opportunity, and I'd love to see the sector take advantage of this. And that opportunity is that the chief executive officer of Boston is an artist. Like, oh my gosh, what an opportunity. And so I'm curious if the Boston art sector has gotten together and asked the mayor for stuff yet. And so that's a huge opportunity. So when it comes to
Absolutely, I agree.
and I think not even just in the city or the state, but maybe in the whole art sector, I get emails from community members that say, oh my God, they cut the arts budget from the schools in this town, in this city. And my next question is, did you all go to the hearing about the budget?
Hold them accountable.
Did you all show up in droves to say, we're voters, and if you do this, you may be jeopardizing your... there are opportunities. Where I'm from in Maryland, specifically in Montgomery County, the support and the policy and the funding for the arts and arts and education was so strong, but we showed up at the public square. We showed up. And I remember that first time when I got my job at the Adventure Theater, when they had the sort of the candidate forum for those people seeking election. I didn't go, and my email and my phone blew up. They were like, where are you? Don't you care about arts and culture? Why aren't you here? And I was like, I get it. And so the relationship between the arts, the civic leaders, the legislators, and the decision makers was so strong that there were so many relationships between arts and real estate, arts and education, arts and this and arts and that. The whole zeitgeist changed because we were so intrinsic. I mean, again, it's another place where there's been lots of research and white papers and articles about the intrinsic value of arts on people in school. People do better. They go to school, they learn how to engage in groups. Their brains are trained to think more creatively. They do better in math and science and history. And so maybe entrepreneurially, like the arts prescription thing, we need some cool product. Or maybe we just need to think about how we can show up in mass and put pressure on people that make decisions about what's happening. I also think about, the state has a lot of infrastructure for STEM. And I've been having meetings about STEAM. Actually, I'm switching my brain from STEAM to C-STEM.
Yes, C-STEM.
Creativity, because I think
Yes.
creativity is a little bit more digestible than the arts for some people. But I wonder where we can work with the state to create infrastructure for STEAM. It's a workforce development concept in my mind, and if we do it right. I also think about all those kids. I wonder if I walked into any school in the state and asked the student body to raise their hand if they wanted to have a career in the arts, what percentage of that student body would raise their hand? I'm guessing it would be 5 to 10%. And so if we don't have infrastructure for that, we might be missing out on a huge talent pool.
Yes, I completely agree with that statement. As an educator, with 13 through 18-year-olds, I find when that question is asked, some of them are not sure how to start, number one. Number two, immigrant families being first gen. Their parents are advocating for them to take a different path, doctor, a lawyer, whatever it is, as opposed to the arts, because again, that starving artist mentality is still here.
Yep.
So I agree. It holds with accountability with our communities, with people who are voting people into these positions, but it also takes us and parents and the students to advocate for ourselves as well for the arts.
Yep. That goes back again to we have to change our behavior. Like we can't expect the world to change if we keep doing the things the way we do. And so to me, civic engagement and business acumen are two of the treatment plans, I would say, for anyone going into the arts. The other thing, to your point about both immigrant families and the kids that raise their hands that want to be in the arts, but they don't know where to start. That goes back to the infrastructure that we need to push for so that those kids can see that it is a viable career. Again, we think about some of our most wealthy and famous people in this country, and they're all artists. And so it is possible to have a thriving, lucrative career in the arts, but we have to start thinking bigger picture about this massive, I mean, in Massachusetts, it's a $28.6 billion industry.
Say that again? I'm sorry, what was the number?
$28.6 billion industry. That's almost 3 times the size of transportation and about 5 billion more than construction, and on par with retail. If we think about how much infrastructure there is to support retail and to support small businesses, we need to think about that for the arts. And
I think you're already thinking that. I mean, with the healthcare, with housing, you know, you said you've gotten some emails even regarding like from housing different sectors. And I think all of that coincides. Again, that's the behavior. It's finding the infrastructure or having the infrastructure, creating the platforms for them to then thrive, but then also creating sustainability so that they stay in the space and can still live and feed their families off of it.
Right. I mean, what I'm going to need as part of state government is support from the sector. I'm going to need, if we are to file bills that could support the whole sector, I'm going to need the sector to show up in droves, not just a few, not just those few that are connected, but and especially brown and black people. I also, you know, one of the things we learned during COVID, when we got the $60 million to do COVID relief money, we made sure that the bill didn't specify for-profit or not. I mean, didn't specify nonprofit, so it could be for-profit. Yes. And we also made sure the bill prioritized marginalized communities in the grant, in the divvying of the monies. What we learned is that we have a lot of for-profit immigrant arts organizations, and partly because they're coming from countries that don't have a nonprofit practice. And so there's not a lot of support for them because many of the organizations that support small businesses don't necessarily think of arts as a business. And so we have a lot of work to do, to say.
And that brings me to my next question. As of February of 2021, you took the task of becoming the executive director of Mass Cultural Council, the highest ranking cultural official in Massachusetts state government.
I want a cape.
Do you want your name on the back too? How have you navigated, and this is why I'm asking this question because you just named the COVID-19 grant. What was that number again that you were allotted?
60.1 million, and there were 2 other grants that I think were about 10 or 20 million.
And how many people did you serve with that? How many people were allotted grants with that money?
I think the 60, I can't remember what the numbers are for, I'm seeing a graphic, but I can't remember. What the 60 million, there were 4,000 individual artists that were given $5,000 grants, and then there were about 1,300 to 1,400 arts organizations that got grants. I think the smallest was 5, up to 75,000.
I just wanted to give you your flowers really quick for the audience at home because that's a lot of people.
And a big shout out to the staff because they were running on fumes. It was
shout out to the staff.
So much work. I mean, I have no idea how we got through last year.
Oh, but you did though.
We did.
You got through it.
Yeah.
With that being said though, I know that there were definite challenges within that. So how have you and your team, and I love that you said team because I know being in this position, a lot of people are like, it's you. But it's actually a team of people that support you. How have you all navigated the challenges presented by the COVID-19 pandemic? And outside of the initiatives that you've already implemented, can you name what is your biggest, proudest moment out of the COVID-19 pandemic that you can say you've reflected on?
I'll answer the last one first. When we knew that money was coming, and based on little Michael Bobbitt that's in my soul, we really wanted to focus on making sure that money was dispersed as equitably and diversely as possible. So I said to the staff, we're going to create a recruitment plan. We're going to make sure that we are prioritizing arts organizations that never get funding. We're also going to find, through whatever means you can, every single artist that doesn't get considered an artist. So we were out there searching for drag artists and tattooists and DJs and curators and all these people that just get left out of funding because they're backstage people, tech people. If you work in the art sector, you're eligible for this money. So that I'm super proud of, and the fact that we prioritize first-time grantees.
Love that.
That was exciting because that actually even set up some operationalizing of our grant priorities beyond that. So that's super exciting. I think that because the COVID-19 was an opportunity for the whole sector to reevaluate the things that make us vulnerable to pandemics. I don't think we were successful as a sector in that reevaluation because most of us have gone back to doing business as normal. And even though the numbers are showing that the audiences are almost back to where they were pre-pandemic, finances are back to where they were pre-pandemic, though the money that they used to get is not worth as much as it used to be worth because of inflation. So there's still some struggles. We had a bunch of casualties with arts organizations closing.
Spaces
Closing. And who knows? And COVID-19 is here forever, so space is always going to be vulnerable. But more than that, I think the business models that were designed back in the 60s and the 70s are still practices that we do today. And I wonder, considering that the whole sector is somewhat insolvent, I wonder if it's time to radically reimagine how we do business. And so while I think Mass Cultural Council did a great job during the COVID-19 crisis, we were so head down working on getting these grants and getting you all as much money as possible. I think the opportunity to change the culture around the way we do business to really help people go, if the pandemic comes again, I don't want to be on the verge of closing. There's so many practices that we do, like subscriptions and annual budgeting. There's some weird things that we do that maybe need to be relooked at. And I want to start thinking about ways to do that. I think we came together in a great way on advocacy for that COVID-19 funding.
Absolutely.
But funding is non-binary. Funding, funding can be something that keeps the status quo, right? It can make us not look at our business models. We're also super creative, so we're always going to find a way to make it happen. But they may not be a good thing either. Like, maybe it's more about the models and the practices that we do. So funding has its challenges because it's great aid and it's super meaningful for the people that get it. But what about the people that don't get it? So that COVID-19 kind of prompted our strategic plan. And I asked two questions during our strategic planning process. The first question was, what is the benefit of the agency to those people who don't get grants? Which is most of the sector. A very small group of people are getting grants.
Yeah.
So that's a big existential question to ask. The second question is, what are we uniquely positioned to do as a state arts agency? We're not private philanthropy, we're not corporate sponsorship, we are embedded in state government, which means that we have access to state government. Because the sector is not as organized as the business sector, healthcare, tech, the gun lobby, there's not a lot of cultural policy there. So in my mind, there's an endless bucket of possibility on cultural policy that can support everyone beyond the grants. So that's the focus of Mass Cultural Council post-pandemic. How do we infuse arts and culture into all part of the Commonwealth in a policy partnership kind of way? Because I think about the different agencies that can have a connection to the arts, but it's not on their minds. And so that's what we're doing. We're meeting with everyone. Like I am in the rooms with other bureaucrats more than I would have ever imagined. I'm hoping from that will come.
Sounds like you're gearing up to write some bills for us to be showing up and supportive. I'm just
Yay.
saying,
Well,
that's what it's
I'm
giving.
hoping so. I'm hoping so. If it makes sense, I'm hoping so.
That's what I wanted to ask you looking ahead. What are some of your key initiatives and goals for the future of Mass Cultural Council? You touched upon some of them already, but how do you envision the arts evolving in this post-pandemic world?
Yep. I feel like there are three constituents that I'm sort of working with. There's leadership. So this is public and private leadership. So how do I pontificate and convince them that we can be here to support the things that they're doing? We're here to be problem solvers in a mutually beneficial way. So that's meeting with the administration, the legislation, the private sector businesses. We're here, the art sector, make sure we're in all the rooms that are being created to talk about the Commonwealth's problems. It's sometimes strange, like I show up at a transportation convening, they're like, why are you here?
Right,
I'm like,
are you talking marketing?
Yeah, well, like artists use transportation.
They do.
People that go to arts use transportation.
They sure do.
Maybe we can help make the writer experience nicer, lovelier. I don't know. But show up in housing conversations. Artists need housing. There might be some solutions we can offer. But so
artist studios,
right.
You know,
Yeah.
something of the nature. Or maybe artists could be the musical soundtrack that you hear on the train announcing the stops.
All kinds of things. There are all kinds of opportunities. So that's one constituency. Then I have my staff, and we're getting there. We are embracing this. We're calling it sector advancement, where we're thinking about advancing the whole sector as opposed to focusing primarily on grants, which I'm super excited about. So they've turned the corner on this. They're seeing the benefit. We've had a couple of small successes. So that's one constituency. The third constituency is the sector. One, to get them to see us differently than just the money people, but to see us as the people that can advance the sector, to be a broker between this agency or this sector and the arts sector. To be a concierge, to say, oh, hey, you need this, we should talk to these people. And then to be a policy person, people that can really push policy. I just think there's many different opportunities. So my three big priority areas for policy is creative placemaking, which could include housing and studios, but also like we have cultural districts programs, so how can we build those up?
Yep.
The state has an embarrassment of riches of waterfronts that are all in threat with climate. Could we turn those waterfronts into arts placemaking and use those resources to deal with climate stuff? I don't know.
Providence actually uses their waterfront for arts all the time.
Yeah.
So you might be onto something.
But I think as I've been pontificating today, I think that sort of third constituency is that I'm going to need the sector to change their behavior and to really start thinking about not settling for the status quo and not being okay being a starving artist. And I don't need us to like become angry and indignant about this. Right. I need us to go,
assertive.
Okay. Well, I mean, not even assertive so much. I mean, yes, we can be assertive, but what are the other tools we can use to make systems change? Because that's really what we're talking about. So we'll see how it goes.
It's the question for the folks at home. I have two more questions for you. One of the last questions I have for you is just advice, and this could come from little Michael, could come from adult Michael. What advice would you give to young artists and leaders, particularly those in the Black and LGBTQIA communities who are navigating their careers amidst the current global challenges, but also just existing as an artist?
I would say on the personal front, my journey over the last 12 years has been a deep dive into my own health, physical, mental, spiritual, emotional, creative, cultural, financial, nutritional health. I'm happy to say at 52, I'm healthier than I've ever been.
52?
I know, sponsored by Cocoa Butter.
Next time we're gonna say shea butter though. We're gonna say shea butter because that's what we doing over here. But cocoa butter works as long as you did not say Vaseline or Vaseline.
Right.
We good.
Right.
52, Michael.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, but I feel happier and healthier than I've ever felt in my whole entire life, and that has been an intentional journey to focus in on health. So when the world gets busy and crazy, I actually double down on my self-care. So I encourage young people, people of color, to develop a really rigid self-care practice and make it sacred, because as you're dealing with all the stuff we have to deal with, that thing's going to help with the clarity that you're going to need to survive all that stuff. I would say on the professional side, we got to play the game. People do business with people they know. Decisions are made in the rooms where people show up. If you're not at the table, you are on the menu. And sometimes we want to be invited to the table. And yes, let's keep fighting to be invited to the table. But sometimes we just need to show up at the table without that invitation. And that has been the thing that has advanced my whole career. I have shown up. I go, oh, I need to be in that room. Let me just go. So more labor, more work. But I think the results are, I mean, I just see it. People do business with people they know. When I was running a theater, actors would get mad at me because I didn't call them before this audition. And I would go, there's one of me, there are all of you. Like, why didn't you reach out? So that's the personal and the professional advice I would offer.
That's beautiful advice, honestly. First of all, what was that quote again? You said you either at the table or you on the menu?
Right. It's true.
It is very true. Showing up and just being present is most of the work. I think people just needed to hear that coming from somebody like you.
It's scary. And even as the highest ranking government official of arts and culture, it's scary and intimidating to walk up to a secretariat or the governor or a legislator. There's still a moment of like, ooh, but I still do it.
How do you get through that moment? How do you get through that
Practice.
moment? Okay.
Practice. I think embarrassment and fear is...
Humility is what I call it.
Yeah.
Humility.
Yeah.
People say, oh, humble, you're so humble. No, it's humility.
Yeah.
I see you in that light as well.
But you also practice...
Absolutely.
Your humility. I practice my
Every
humility.
Day.
Yeah. I mean, I know for me, embarrassment only lasts a few minutes, a few seconds, really. I know that fear is based on the unknown. And if I can tell myself, that's okay. It's okay to be fearful. It would be weird if you weren't scared. And I just step forward and do it.
Most of those times are the most transformative. It's when you actually come out on the other side. Way different.
Yeah.
With that being said, to end off our time today, Michael, please take a moment and tell our listeners an inspirational quote or something that you would like to hear, maybe from like your younger self.
There's the personal and the professional.
Let's hear them both.
Okay. The personal is that you're going to be okay. Actually, I would say you're going to be better than okay.
I needed to hear that.
Yeah. I think we deal with so much, and to know that, and hope is not a business strategy, but it is a motivator. And so for me, when I am dealing with whatever stress or personal things, I go, you're going to be okay. And that just sparks a little bit of hope that kind of pushes me through. Ibram X. Kendi said that, this idea that racism is here forever seals the lid on the coffin. And he says that we could never have imagined the biggest industry in the world, the enslavement industry, could have ended. If we didn't have hope that could have ended, we would have sealed the nail on the coffin. Or sealed the lid on the coffin. So we have to hope that these things can end, and that will motivate us. So that's the personal thing, just you're going to be better than okay. The professional thing I would say is, and I heard this from a professor in school, that the status quo is not an accident. it's actually doing exactly what it's supposed to do.
Mm.
And that leadership has to be willing to be persecuted for their ideas and vision. And so if you don't like the status quo and you want to change it, you've got to step up and be a leader and to know that people are not going to be okay with it. And so every time I'm like coming up with new ideas or pushing people to move in a different direction or even saying things on this meeting that might piss people off, I know that there's something to those things. And I'm okay to have a debate or a conversation or a disagreement about it, because disagreements to me is data. Opposition is an asset. And so I'm still going to lead and know that some people are not going to be happy with the leadership, but I'm not okay with the status quo. So
say that one more time. You are not okay with the status quo.
I'm not okay with it.
Michael J. Bobbitt, thank you so much for being here today, sharing your vulnerability, your insight, your knowledge. Thank you for all that you do for the community and what you will continue to do for this community. Everything that I named, all of your accolades and all of the titles and many hats that you have worn, one of them, and I hope that everybody got that today in today's conversation, is you are a visionary, but you're also an intergalactic being. That is a term that I took from Kat Morris, who says that when you are magical and you just embody what is outside of this galaxy, you are an intergalactic being, and that is exactly what you are. Thank you for everything that you do, and thank you to your team as well. Thank you so much for being here. I still am just in awe in your work ethic, but more so your actual heart. You care, and that is so telling in the way that you speak, the way that you move, and how you create these opportunities and these platforms for everybody to succeed. The inclusivity that you make sure that you have in this community is absolutely amazing. So thank you so much. I'm really excited to see what else you have up your sleeve, because Cultural RX, I know, is just one of the many things. But when you get those bills, okay, you definitely have my support and the support of everybody else in the city of Boston and beyond. Thank you so much for everything that you do, and thank you for sitting down with me today.
Thank you for you. Thank you for making the world better with your art. And I fell in love when I saw you at Central Square, and I'm like, I love that lady.
I love you
I want to hang out with her. So
Rest
we're doing
in peace,
it.
Starlight, but we're coming back.
I know, we're coming back,
We're coming
Starlight.
back.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you so much.